In 2016, I was working a dead-end 9 to 5 job in Jakarta that kept me on a regular routine of eating 2 healthy meals per day and having a steady income, with attempts of training sessions at the gym and pool facilities in my apartment building complex. No complicated romances and minimal alcohol consumption. I'd say I was at 75% of my mental and physical health, optimum condition, with mild symptoms of anxiety and manic episodes. I decided there and then to get back into surfing and creating my art, understanding the healing power of nature and art. My weeks would be divided into weekdays at my job in the city and the weekends in Bali, surfing and attempting to lift myself to a higher plane where I could create something relevant and extraordinary. Had not been for this decision of spending my weekends away, the following story would never have happened. This story starts in a room with a view on a cliff overlooking the Indian Ocean and a chance encounter between adjacent rooms. We came from different worlds, and even though this is not in any way the focus of the story, this single fact infuses the relation and comes full circle in its ultimate conclusion. My word was Tokyo and São Paulo, and I knew those two crowded and busy cities like the back of my hands. She hailed from the polar Arctic Circle, and together we understood so well the disconnect between people, whether in Tokyo's busiest neon-lit streets or in the cold, silent, and desolate empty spaces of the Nordic countries. At this point, I worked a 9 to 5 as a means to make money. I did my 8 and I was out the gate daily. Then worked on my art and physical conditions twice a week, mainly on the weekends. However, I was convinced of my talents. This had always been a deep-seated belief of mine, almost a religion of sorts, that consisted in 2 parts. That hard work and appreciation of nature is part of the worship of God, and it brought me closer to the source, to the infinite. She told me that she hated herself, and this revelation seemed to me, at the time, very irrational, coming from such a health-conscious, tall and fit, eco-friendly, environmentally aware, vegan, well-mannered, and mildly alcoholic Scandinavian adult white female. Why? I wondered then. And now I think that she, somehow like me, just did not understand her place in the world and was physically healthy, very intelligent, and sane. To me, we were what Vincent van Gogh described as companions in misfortune. Eventually we moved in together, and sometimes we went on for days in silence, sharing the same space. I enjoyed her silence, which was that like that of a star, bright and distant, sad and blue. Moments of deeper connection were interrupted by explosive arguments and verbal assaults about nothing special, and we would spend much of our time in silence, eating vegan food, drinking wine, and smoking cheap logo glove cigarettes. As a couple, we shared the same space, but in habit, we lived in different worlds. And in these silent moments, we created our own private movie, this ambiguous relationship, emotionally unresolved, not communicating but together, yet disconnected from each other and ourselves. As if trapped on a scene in an illuminated stage inside a darkened theater room. a relationship influenced by interior design, lighting, cropping, and angles normally seen in cinema. And unnoticed by her, I kept on honing into my storytelling skills. I planned and directed every scene with her as my muse. Hours of preparation and thought went into these imaginary characters, the clothes they would wear, props, lighting, cropping, and the final composition of the narrative. These scenes consoled and comforted me. Deciding on a subject matter has always been a process of high anxiety for me, but once decided, I'd follow up with countless tools to establish a visual understanding and then rely on my subconscious to refine the final look and feel of it. Oftentimes, one's work can feel as a descent into madness, but mine drove me instead and energized me. I created the work despite of all the issues and not because of it. The lines and angles of a composition must be planned as an architect uses space and perspective to pull the eyes to where the action is, causing our gaze to shift from exterior to interior. The details around the central narrative must be minimal to achieve this effect. Ours was a word in lockdown pre-pandemic that emphasized the silence and the characters trapped inside it, like specimens in a jar. As if we lived in 1600s Japan Edo era, with strictly closed borders, punishable by death to anyone attempting to enter or leave it. Melancholic settings enhances the emotional content of the work. These characters are in their own world and tension somehow radiates from them and creates an open-ended narrative that demands the active role of the viewer to complete the story. The play is with expectations and the unconscious mind, and it is unclear for whom all this is for. But one thing is clear. This is all inside my own head. I am a fan of Hemingway and Kurosawa, who are some of my inspiration and influences. I pay homage to the use of anonymous settings, high contrast lighting, decentralized framing, and extreme cropping, but in particular, the characters they painted. Characters waiting for their story to be told. These settings and scenes become a shortcut to emotional dysfunction, and to me, the best films are not only about composition and style. Masterworks can, in a single frame, suggest a narrative that stretches far beyond the picture plane. Isolation has been good for me, and I've been able to channel all my energy into my work, lay the foundations of a unique lifestyle, and further develop my own visual vocabulary. I turned these last couple of years into the most prolific of my life. This short story ends and coincides with the COVID-19 pandemic and a world shut down. Streets emptied out. Public spaces dark and silent. International borders closed until further notice. And this is where the story stayed. Once the pandemic started and I found my way in it, I made up for lost time. As a quiet cat, I always projected an image of the everyday man, while in reality, reality. I've been a complicated and troubled intellectual who struggles to find inspiration and grapples with meaning, whose real work takes months of preparation and has a limited production output, sometimes less than that. We both felt like outsiders with exceptional talents, a fact that certainly contributed to our sense of isolation and alienation, companions in a quiet anguish. And as many people discover, you can be in a relationship or live in the world's busiest city and still feel utterly alone. And art can demonstrate to us that these feelings are normal and commonplace, but ironically also shows us that actually we are not alone. And perhaps this story ended right at the verge before it became what it could ultimately have been.